Steve Forbes is with us, the Forbes media chairman. What do you think? Is there an opening for President Trump that the Democrats have left on China? And if so, how does he exploit that or take advantage of it next week?
The opening is huge. You could drive an old big dump truck through that one, that and what the riots in the cities domestically. And in terms of China, Biden was on tape several years ago saying, what's the big deal? We're cozy with China. He dismissed the thing. You're going to see that in campaign ads. I think it's running already. And the key thing is, what do we do about China? Trump, whether you like it or not, has taken effective steps on a number of fronts. And I think more steps are going to be taken, especially in the South China Sea and other areas where China's been very aggressive militarily. And this gets to the U.S. military buildup. The focus here has been on defunding the police. What about the proposals to defund the military at a time when we need a stronger military than any time since the Cold War, especially with the Navy in the South China Sea and elsewhere?
When it comes to China, and you mentioned some of the issues, Steve, and Rich did a good job. He ran through a lot of them, whether it's, it could be TikTok, it could be trade, could be human rights, you name it. It's out there. So should the president hone in on one or two of those, or does he go in the direction of talking about the virus and how he thinks the Chinese are to blame for the virus, and that, his handling of that could be a weak point politically for him? So does he try to use the shifting of the blame next week to his advantage?
Well, when they bring up the virus, he can point out, as he's done in the past, what he did in January, and the Democrats are silent or actively opposed to it. But I think what he can really have fun with in terms of politics is, where does Joe Biden stand on the South China Sea? Where does he stand on TikTok? Where does he stand on Huawei? Put some real things on the table. Where is Trump going wrong with dealing with China? And that way you pinpoint them. What are the specifics? One of the things about the Democratic convention this week, was how they didn't have a lot of specifics. They had a couple of things, but that was it. And people are going to want to know, what exactly are you going to do? And what is Biden going to do in terms of presenting a united front, in terms of bringing in closer relationships, as we're already establishing with countries like India, Vietnam, and elsewhere? They used to say, before the vegans try to educate us, where's the beef? Where's the beef on this?
Yeah, that's exactly what they used to say. It wasn't just China this week, Steve. The Democrats didn't really talk that much about foreign policy at all. I mean, they had people like John Kerry, I guess, who could have done it, the former Secretary of State. Biden himself experienced in foreign policy, but they didn't really focus on that. I would assume because they think other issues are more beneficial to them, or they can win without it. But what did you make of that?
Well, they always talk about how our relationships with our allies are frayed. But again, what specifically do they have in mind? John Kerry brought up the deal architected the deal with Iran on nuclear weapons. We know what a sham that was. And so again, Trump can say to Biden, you gave Iran $150 billion. Most of it went to terrorism and stirring up trouble in the Middle East, spilling a lot of blood. What exactly are you going to do about that? And in terms of inspectors, one of the things that agreement did not provide was allowing spot inspections anytime, anywhere in Iran. So you can hone in on the specific flaws of that and say to Joe Biden, you were there. Why didn't you fix that? And so, again, those are issues. People know national security is important. And on the Russian front, they say, oh, he's cozy with Putin. But Trump can point out, in terms of weapons to Ukraine, the Trump administration did far more than the Barack Obama-Biden administration, and other issues. So, again, get the specifics. What are you going to do differently? Don't just say, oh, we'll have a united front and everything will be cozy-rosy. No, sir, not in this world. And I think Trump can say, when it comes to getting real things done with Russia, we've done more than that at previous administration. And remember, until the election, it was all talk of reset with Russia. We're going to be friends with Russia.
Right.
We're going to have a new relationship with Russia. Yeah, we had a new one, all right, but not what they outlined 8 years before.
Well, we'll see what happens next week. I think, especially with China, the Trump administration, or the president himself, probably thinks there are some openings there on a number of different fronts. So we'll see how much it comes up next week. Steve, thanks. Have a great weekend.